So, Bruno Reagan tweeted out, "The Battlehawks are back." And that got me thinking. We already knew the XFL was coming back in 2023, but saying the Battlehawks are back implies not all the teams will be back. So, today I'm going to go over the teams that the XFL should bring back and the ones that can stay behind. For those of you who don't know or are curious, Bruno Reagan was an offensive lineman for the Battlehawks, so I'd say he's a fairly credible source. But to me, it's just a no-brainer to bring the Battlehawks back. I would bet everything that the Battlehawks are coming back, and that's because St. Louis really showed out in support of them, as I predicted they would. You know, they really got screwed over by the NFL when it came to the whole Rams relocation process, so they were just ecstatic to have pro football back. So even if Bruno's sources are wrong, I guarantee that pro football will be back in St. Louis. As for other XFL teams that I can see coming back, or rather that I want to see come back, to me, it's just the Seattle Dragons. Now, if you saw my USFL video, you'll know that I'm very adamant that these teams need to be in places that don't already have NFL teams, and obviously the Dragons will never be bigger than the Seattle Seahawks. But looking at attendance, which is the figure I usually base all my judgment on, the Dragons were by far the second most successful XFL team, obviously behind the Battlehawks. Most teams stood around 17,000 fans. The Battlehawks and Dragons both exceeded 20, so it just makes financial sense to bring back your second most successful team as just more of a safety net than anything. It's been there and you know it works. Alright, as for teams that I don't want to come back and don't think are coming back, let's start with the Tampa Bay Vipers. Now, this team is the least likely team to come back to me because I recall seeing a rumor that they're going to move to Orlando, and personally, I absolutely love it. I was a fan of the Orlando Apollos back in the day of the AAF, and they had some fan support. A lot more than the Tampa Bay Vipers did, at least, and Tampa is getting a USFL team, so it just makes sense to get out of an overcrowded market and hit one that has shown success and is pretty untapped. There are two more XFL teams that currently reside in cities that the USFL is planning on going to, so let's go ahead and kick those out right now. First being the Houston Roughnecks. Now, if you're a bit of a football historian, you'll know that the Houston Oilers left Houston in favor of Memphis, Tennessee, before later moving to Nashville to become the Tennessee Titans. Well, we're going to repeat history here by sending the Houston Roughnecks to Memphis, Tennessee, but this time they're going to stay there and play at the Liberty Bowl. Now, Memphis has wanted a football team for a while. They got the Oilers for a very short time before moving to Nashville, but they never felt like Memphis's team. So if you move the Roughnecks to Memphis and really embrace the city, Memphians will come out to support them. The other XFL team being uprooted by the USFL is the New York Guardians. And I'm going to go ahead and send them all the way across the country to Oakland. Now, Oakland had probably the best fan base in the NFL, and because of stadium concerns, the Raiders obviously left for Las Vegas. And no Raiders fans are going from Oakland to Vegas, and no Raiders fans would dare root for the 49ers. So they're just kind of out of luck if they want to attend a live football game. So might as well give Oakland their own team in the XFL, this one being the New York Guardians. Heck, they can keep the black hole from the Raiders days because the Guardians' colors are black. This is just a no-brainer. Next is an XFL team that should have never existed because LA is not a good place for football. We're sending the Los Angeles Wildcats to San Diego, where they should have been all along. Kind of fun that we're sending the LA team to San Diego when LA stole San Diego's NFL team. Anyway, the Wildcats can play at Petco Park, and San Diego fans will show up similarly to how St. Louis fans showed up to Battlehawks games, if nothing else just to protest Dean Spanos taking the Chargers from them. It's a home run. Next, I have the DC Defenders going to Columbus, Ohio. Now, the reasoning for doing this is they stated on the broadcast back in the day while the XFL was still going on that due to Cardell Jones being the quarterback for the DC Defenders, they had a ton of viewership from Columbus. I believe it was more viewers from Columbus than anywhere else. So there's already a positive association with Columbus and the DC Defenders. So move the Defenders to Columbus. They can play at Ohio Stadium and just load the team with former Buckeyes. For the last team, I have the Renegades moving to San Antonio. And I don't feel like the Renegades are going to move, considering the fact that the old Rangers Stadium is being renovated to be a soccer and football stadium for the Dallas Renegades. So it seems unlikely that they will get moved, but nevertheless, one of the teams should go to San Antonio. I've said over and over again that there needs to be one of these spring football teams in the Alamo Dome. The San Antonio Commanders had amazing attendance, and San Antonio just deserves another sports team. Here's a little bonus team that I could see joining the XFL, and that is the Toronto Argonauts. As of right now, the CFL is kind of a sinking ship. It's only really popular in Western Canada, and by far the least popular team is the Toronto Argonauts, which is kind of weird considering that Toronto is the biggest city in the CFL. However, we all remember when the XFL had discussions with the CFL over a potential merger. Well, the leading contributor to those discussions was the Toronto Argonauts ownership group. They're the ones that wanted it to happen the most, and the other CFL teams really didn't want it to happen, and that's why it ultimately didn't turn into anything. So I think there's a scenario where the XFL could buy the Toronto Argonauts to try and tap into a Canadian market, have an established brand in Canada, and the CFL would probably be willing to let them go because 9 teams is an awkward number, so they just drop down to 8, and the Toronto Argonauts are by far the least popular team in the CFL. So both leagues would win in their way if the Argonauts were to come over to the XFL. If you made it this far in the video, there's a pretty good chance you enjoyed it, so make sure to give it a like and subscribe for any future football content.